In the early 1960s, an American could reach into their pocket, pull out a handful of loose change, and unknowingly hold real wealth in their palm. The dimes and quarters jingling together were not just symbols of value. They were value. Solid, tangible silver, stamped with familiar faces and dates, carrying within them a promise that had defined money for thousands of years. But by the middle of the decade, something strange began to happen. The coins felt lighter. The sound they made changed. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the foundation of money itself began to shift. On evening news broadcasts, government officials explained it away with simple logic. America, they said, was experiencing a coin shortage. The booming post-war economy had people spending more than ever. Vending machines were swallowing up small change at an unprecedented rate. Coin collectors were hoarding shiny silver pieces. The U.S. Mint simply couldn't keep up. To solve this logistical crisis, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Coinage Act of 1965, replacing the traditional 90% silver dimes and quarters with new copper-nickel versions. These new coins, the government promised, were just as good. The public accepted the explanation. After all, it made sense. But beneath that calm narrative, a far darker reality was unfolding. The United States was not running out of coins. It was running out of money. For decades, the dollar had been tethered to precious metals, gold internationally and silver domestically. This anchor imposed discipline. It meant that governments could not endlessly print currency without consequence. Every dollar represented a claim on something real. But by the early 1960s, the strain of this system was becoming unbearable. Massive social programs under the Great Society, coupled with the rapidly escalating war in Vietnam, were pushing government spending to historic levels. Inflation was rising. And silver, the metal quietly stabilizing everyday transactions, was becoming a problem. Industrial demand for silver was exploding. Photography, electronics, medical equipment, and military technology all depended on it. As demand surged, the global market price of silver began climbing toward a dangerous threshold. The U.S. Treasury had fixed the price of silver at $1.29 per ounce, a number carefully calculated to keep silver coins circulating. But as the market price approached and threatened to exceed this peg, the mathematics of money turned against the government. If silver became worth more as metal than as currency, people would naturally begin hoarding and melting their coins. It would be profitable to destroy money. This was Gresham's law in action. Bad money drives out good. When forced to choose, people spend the weaker currency and hoard the stronger one. The Treasury knew that if silver crossed a certain price, the nation's entire coinage system would collapse. So they fought the market. Day after day, the U.S. Treasury sold silver from its vast reserves, flooding the global market to suppress the price. They dumped millions of ounces into circulation, bleeding their own stockpiles dry. Trucks rolled out of government vaults carrying silver bars that would never return. What looked like stability on the surface was actually desperation beneath. The government was burning through its strategic reserves just to maintain the illusion that the dollar was sound. And they were losing. By the mid-1960s, the writing was on the wall. The silver vaults were draining at an alarming rate. If nothing changed, the United States would soon face a catastrophic failure of its currency system. The silver certificates in circulation, paper bills redeemable for real silver, would become impossible to honor. The government stood at a crossroads: either face the discipline of honest money or quietly abandon it. They chose abandonment. When President Johnson stood before cameras in 1965 and announced the new coins, he reassured Americans that there was no need to hoard silver. He insisted the Treasury had plenty on hand and that silver would remain stable. But it was a bluff. The reserves were already vanishing. Within 3 years, the government would completely abandon the silver peg. In 1968, the promise printed on silver certificates that they could be redeemed for actual silver was officially revoked. People lined up around city blocks, desperate to exchange their paper for tiny bags of silver granules because the treasury no longer had enough bars or coins. When the deadline passed, the window slammed shut forever. Those who trusted the government and spent their silver lost nearly everything. Those who hoarded preserved their wealth. This moment marked a profound psychological shift. Before 1965, saving money meant saving metal. A jar of coins was a form of insurance, a hedge against uncertainty. Ordinary families could protect themselves from inflation simply by holding onto change. But after the silver was removed, money became something abstract, dependent on trust rather than substance. The copper-nickel coins offered no shelter from inflation. To preserve wealth, people now had to enter the financial system: banks, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The middle class became permanently tied to financial markets, forced to chase returns just to stay afloat. It transformed a nation of savers into a nation of investors. With the physical anchor removed, inflation surged. The 1970s saw prices spiral upward, wages lag behind, and interest rates soar to punishing levels. Entire families watched their purchasing power collapse. And yet, the true cause remained hidden. Politicians blamed oil shocks. They blamed unions. They blamed corporate greed. But the deeper truth lay in the silent act of 1965, when the last meaningful restraint on money creation was dismantled. The consequences are still unfolding today. To understand the magnitude of what was lost, consider a simple comparison. In 1964, a single silver quarter could buy a gallon of gasoline. Today, that same 1964 quarter, melted for its silver content, is worth roughly the same amount. The price of gas, measured in silver, hasn't changed in over half a century. The illusion of rising prices is not caused by scarcity. It is caused by the shrinking value of the dollar. This realization shatters conventional thinking. Inflation isn't prices going up. It's money going down. And the cycle continues. Now, copper and nickel themselves are becoming victims of the same forces that once consumed silver. The modern U.S. nickel often costs more to produce than its face value. The government loses money on everyone it mints. This is a mathematical warning sign. When the cost of creating money exceeds its worth, the system is fundamentally broken. History suggests the next step is inevitable: debasement. Cheaper metals, lighter coins, lower quality. And once again, the older, more valuable versions will vanish from circulation. We are watching the same movie play again, just with different actors. Meanwhile, the psychological groundwork laid in 1965 has paved the way for something even more radical: the disappearance of physical money itself. Once society accepted that coins had no intrinsic value, the shift toward digital transactions became natural. Plastic cards replaced cash. Phone apps replaced wallets. And now, central bank digital currencies loom on the horizon, promising efficiency and control at the cost of privacy and autonomy. In 1964, if you held a silver dollar, you possessed wealth that no authority could cancel or freeze. In a digital system, money becomes permission-based. It exists only as long as institutions allow it to. The removal of silver did not just debase currency. It conditioned generations to accept money as an abstract tool of state power rather than a tangible store of value. Yet, beneath all this, the ancient metals quietly wait. Silver, long suppressed in paper markets and derivatives, remains essential to modern technology. Solar panels, electric vehicles, medical devices, military systems, all depend on it. Consumption now outpaces production. Above-ground stockpiles are shrinking. The same physical constraints that forced the government's hand in 1965 are returning, but on a global scale. When industrial users can no longer secure adequate supply, the price suppression will fail. And when it does, the repricing could be violent. Some analysts predict silver prices in the hundreds of dollars per ounce. If that happens, the forgotten coins of 1964 will transform from curiosities into financial lifeboats. The lesson is timeless. Governments will always choose default over discipline. They will always rewrite promises when those promises become inconvenient. The silver certificates were redeemable until they weren't. The coins were just as good until they weren't. The dollar was stable until it wasn't. And now, new promises fill the air, about inflation being temporary, about banking stability, about the security of retirement systems. History suggests these should be met with caution. The Coinage Act of 1965 was not merely a change in metal composition. It was a silent turning point in economic history, a moment when trust replaced substance and convenience replaced truth. The consequences ripple outward through every paycheck, every grocery bill, every mortgage payment. And unless we learn from it, the next transformation may be even more profound. Because the story of silver is not just about the past. It is a warning, etched into metal, waiting for those willing to listen.